Hello and welcome Warhammer friends to a modded faction overview video. This episode we will be covering the Aswad Scythans, which are part of OVN Lost Factions Araby. And how we will structure this video is speaking about the faction leader and her starting army, her strengths and weaknesses, as well as the faction and lord effects before going over to the starting area, talking about the early stage moves and where to expand, and also late game scenarios and strategies too. So Fatindira, she is a hybrid unit utilizing both melee and range attacks, and she is essentially your assassin lord killer. How I would personally use her on the battlefield is shooting enemies, specifically enemy lords, from afar, and if she does run out of ammo, closing the distance. However, that would be the last resort, as she is a little bit of a squishy character. It says that she is a decent melee combatant, but also I would treat her like Deathmaster Snitch and not leave her in prolonged combat either. For her starting army, she has a decent amount of units, but specifically your main killers and damage dealers will be your Giselles, which, just like the Skaven Giselles, are long-range shooters. Nomad Trackers and also Bowmen will be your main archer units. But also one of the main key units are your Desert Riders, as essentially these are your skirmish cavalry, used not only to harass the enemy, but also to essentially pick them apart, divide and conquer. And also, I am getting a little bit ahead of myself, but I would essentially doomstack these. These will essentially carry you in both the early, mid, and late game as well. Now, for the Wogzen, I personally absolutely love them as monstrous shock cavalry. There's some of you who may have mixed feelings when it comes to the Wogzen because of the fact that they are much slower than the Desert Riders themselves, but I personally have used them for both holding the line and also sneaking around and charging into the enemy backline, specifically for the archer units, and they've even held their own against other cavalry like Black Knights as well, and Blood Knights too. But before we get into that specific part of the campaign, let's speak about the faction effects, which Fatindira's allegiance essentially grants you alliance and good friendly relations with the Tomb Kings, specifically with Numas. Now, it's a little bit of a trick start and diplomatic relations, and I'll get into that as well. Numas is going to be an ally, but you're kind of going to question that later down the line. And part of that includes whether you want to return Numas's capital to them and also gain Tomb King units to your army, or to essentially betray Numas and take it for yourself. You also gain recruitment of other Tomb King units and friendly relations with the other Tomb King factions, which you will have a lot of interaction with Cetra, Khalida to the east as well. You gain a +3 control to all provinces. You also gain hero recruit rank for Hashashins. These are going to also essentially be weaker versions of Fatindira, but both a hybrid melee and range unit, capable of lord sniping and, well, like the name says, assassinating them. Also, you do gain negative 15% upkeep for Nomad Trackers, Giselles, Southland Warriors, Camel Lancers, Desert Riders, Camel Archers, and Camel Giselle units. And like I said, Desert Riders are going to be, personally, in my strategy and opinion, your key unit that you will be utilizing, and like I said, doom stacking on the battlefield with her specific army. As for the specific lord effects, ambush success chance 25%, you're going to be utilizing that a lot on the campaign map, especially when going up against potential Tomb King enemies and also vampire counts in the area too. You also gain ammunition +20% for your lord's army, and also stock for Nomad Trackers, Giselles, Southland Warriors, Camel Lancers, Desert Riders, Camel Archers, and Camel Giselle units. Essentially, this is telling you that you should be investing a lot in your cavalry units, and especially skirmish cavalry too. We'll get a look at her starting location as well, and we're also just going to be playing on the default settings. I'm also assuming most Total War players play on this setting. I do know some of the community that is vocal about playing on Legendary very hard. They are extremely adamant about that, but also this is just going to be a casual playthrough. So let's take a look at her starting position. Taking a look at your starting position, you are starting at war with the Arachnos Greenskins, and you're set to assault both the starting army and also make an attack on Granite Massif. Now, even though you are at war with Arachnos, your true enemy, in my personal opinion, is the Lady of the Black Grail, which is another modded faction that's starting in the same area, but also you want to deal with her and also the Silver Host. Now, the reason why I say not to fuss around too much with the Arachnos Greenskins is because the Lady of the Black Grail, she is a very formidable opponent herself. She does use both Bretonnian and also vampire count units in her army. Since she is a hybrid and modded faction, you want to take her out as soon as possible. So with your starting army and also starting Hashashin hero, you want to take out and manually fight this starting greenskin army here. Immediately after, put points into campaign movement range and launch an attack on Granite Massif itself. Occupy it, start recruiting a unit or two of either camel lancers or potentially bowmen as well. Personally, for me, I go with the Camel Lancers, and even though they are not up to par with Bretonnian cavalry, they are essentially going to be your skirmish and harassing cavalry that you'll be using to assault the back lines. As for Karag Orod, I would personally upgrade to the 2nd level building, which will provide you Camel Archers. These are also going to be your main harassers and damage dealers too, and also they're going to essentially run circles around the Bretonnian cavalry, taking pot shots at them and essentially annoying the hell out of them, plus also making them tired. Once you've captured Granite Massif, you'll want to recruit a 2nd Lord, specifically a Grand Vizier with Lore of the Jinn, which is a modded lore of magic, but specifically the starting spell is going to be insanely useful in terms of buying your range units time and also acting as your meat shield. Essentially what this spell does is it summons a mirage of spearmen. Doesn't really do much damage, if at all, if I remember correctly, but you're going to be casting it, sending it against the Bretonnian infantry, while both your skirmisher cavalry and also Giselles and the bowmen do all of the main work. Essentially, Araby isn't really known for its frontline units, but more so its skirmish cavalry and also harassers too. They do like having a lot of ambushers as well. Speaking of ambushes, on the next turn you'll want to take Fatindira's main army, put it into ambush stance, use your Grand Vizier to stand just outside of Merak, not within the battle lines, and declare war on the Lady of the Black Grail. If things work out for you, she will attack you first and fall for that ambush attack. You'll want to fight the battle manually and specifically kill her and as many of her units as possible. During one of my playthroughs, which I do have videos on, what pissed me off a lot was I did kill her off and most of her army. However, she did retreat back, and while being a vampire count faction, she did revive some of her army too, not a whole lot, but essentially that forced my hand to assault Merak and her garrison too. But by that time I was able to recruit some units of camel and desert riders to my army as well. It is personally for me a tough campaign. I would say it's medium to hard difficulty level in the early stages too, due to the fact that you really need to make a beeline for the Lady of the Black Grail and take them out before they have any chance of expansion, or let alone build themselves up with both their Bretonnian and vampire count units. So once you've taken Merak and Granite Massif, You are also set to attack Lamia and also take out the Silver Host. I highly recommend siding with Khalida just because of the fact that you do have positive relations with her already. And also, essentially, you both can carve out and split Lamia and this area in half. It's really up to you at that point too if you want to keep this area. What I did with my campaign was I did trade Karagorod, Granite Massif, and Marak to Khalida for some of this territory here. I also decided to fully take Crater of the Walking Dead. You could also potentially betray Khalida too, although I would not recommend that unless you're fully confident in yourself and you're okay with taking negative penalties to your relations with her and the rest of the Tomb Kings. But essentially, at the end of my playthrough, well, not end of my playthrough, essentially where I left off was a whole lot of region trading with Khalida using this trading settlement mod as well. Essentially, it doesn't make it so that you have to be neighboring with your allies. You can trade faraway provinces to them if you so choose for massive amounts of gold. And yes, you may be losing out on a lot of money too. Just make sure that you try to save up as much and also be very key, have a very key eye on your expenses too. Their units aren't super expensive, but also if you want to trade territory, it will cost you a lot in terms of having plenty of reserves too. As a side note and edit everyone, my last save file where I carved out this area here and split it with Khalida, plus also giving her some territory to act as a buffer zone to Skarbrand and the other Tomb Kings too, was unfortunately corrupted. I believe one of the mods was hidden by the mod author. It wasn't OVN Lost Factions, it was, I believe, Rapunzel's revamped faction. But that aside, I do have more longer videos that showcases every detail of my conquests of reaching this area of the map and even taking out the Silver Host with Khalida. If you want to click on the links of those videos to see how exactly I was able to pull it off. And please let me know in the comments your thoughts on Fatindira's campaign and also any other modded factions that you would like me to cover in more faction overview videos too. Let me also know if there are things that you would like to see in my next upcoming faction overview videos. I did my best to try to keep this concise, but also somewhat in-depth as possible too. And also, regardless if you're a new or returning viewer, thank you so much for taking the time to listen for my faction overview and experiences with Fatindira. I do plan on returning to her campaign soon and also making some political decisions on whether I want to side and help out the rest of the Tomb Kings or potentially betray them and also carve out a path for the Arabian people. And if you want to see more narrative-driven Total War campaigns, or also some Baldurs Gate 3 character builds, I'd love to have you join us on those adventures, friends. So remember to hit the like, subscribe, and bell icon notifications, and I'll save you a seat at the table for those next adventures. Take care and farewell.